In this video, I want to give you some suggestions again on how to use NVivo to write the second section of your essays on media users. And what I'm going to show is how to go from some of the basic ideas um, of what media use means, how media use changes social existence and changes social identities, and relate that to a particular kind of media use. And here I'm going to be talking very specifically about the phenomenon of social media mourning. So what I want to be doing is taking some of the basic ideas from the lecture on media users and showing how you can apply them to a new and really quite strange practice, or what seems quite strange, but actually what makes a lot of sense. The practice of global media mourning, the practice of memorializing the dead through social media, which involves kind of a lot of ways of making sense of death, which in earlier decades would have seemed quite strange. And what I want to suggest is that if we're trying to get in touch with some of the basic ways that the use of social media affects social reality, what I said in the lecture was that one of the big trends in the history of media technologies has been the way that media technologies change the way that we relate to the concepts of public and private. So, we have this idea that some things are out there in the public for everyone's consumption, and some things really belong in the home to the private realm, and it's really nobody else's business. And one of the things that emerged out of studies of girls' popular culture, for example, is that media affect how we make sense of that distinction. And quite often the use of media means turning what we think of as private moments into public spaces. And you can use that quite effectively to talk about the significance of the phenomenon of mass media mourning through social media. So I'll just show you again an NVivo project that I came up with. So I wanted to do something on. I decided that one way to approach the idea that media users determine the impact of media technologies by having a look at how the way that people relate to death on social media has actually changed the way that we think of death as a social ritual. And what I've got here are a series of, so I've got 5 readings on social media mourning. So logging on, letting out, using online social networks to grieve and to mourn by Brian Carroll and Kate Landry. The morning after, a case study of social media in the 3/11 earthquake disaster in Japan. This is a good one. Yeah, Remain in Perpetuity, Facebook memorial pages. That's a great essay. That's a great article. There Isn't Wi-Fi in Heaven, Negotiating Visibility in Facebook memorial pages, and something else on 9/11. So now if we want to look at them, and again, what I've done is I've gone through each of these articles and I've highlighted things where I think that the topic of online mourning is being used to address the broader issue of the way that the use of media changes society. And I've highlighted a number of modes. So you can see one of the things I've looked at here are places where authors comment on the changing nature of privacy. Just to give you a brief overview, the theme of these particular readings is the way that it's a great example of thinking how media rituals affect social rituals. What that means is that societies have always had ritualistic ways of coming to terms with death. And the way that we talk about and deal with and commemorate death has changed throughout the ages. So, for example, if you went back to the 19th century, people did all kinds of things that we wouldn't think of doing now, taking photographs of dead bodies, that type of thing. And what these articles are suggesting is that social media and the way that we commemorate and communicate about death through social media is again one of the forces behind a changing relationship to death. So what I'm doing here is I'm drawing on the idea of the media ritual, and this essentially, again, if we go to, this is from the Brian Carroll and Kate Landry piece. So a couple of ideas in this piece, and again, that's what's being said here. So what Landry and Carroll are saying is that communication, the way that we communicate death, actually has an impact on rituals of mourning. And that the real impact of things like MySpace and Facebook have been that they have, and obviously I've added here an annotation to this particular piece where I've said that what the argument is being made here is that MySpace and Facebook are examples of how media rituals, the way that we come to use media, have actually changed social rituals. So the way that we talk about death on Facebook in particular have actually raised questions, have actually made society think about how they think about death and how they relate to it. So you can see that what I've done is, again, I've talked about the way that this can be related to the public and the private. So one of the things is that, that's happening in these practices is that people are expressing emotions that would normally be held in the family, and they're expressing them in a public space, and so that makes the thing more the death rituals more public. Also, what I've come up with is that this seems to be an effect which is particularly related to Facebook. And the fascinating thing in the analysis here is the way that we see that there are particular ways and particular conventions of memorializing dead people that are specific to Facebook. And quite often, one of the other things that this involves is the formation of new sorts of relationships. So one of the really odd things about Facebook, or one of the things that would seem odd if it was in the offline world, is people feel free to express condolences and insights to complete strangers who have lost loved ones. It's not something you would do if you were walking past a funeral ground, if you were walking past a graveyard and you see a family that you didn't know burying one of their loved ones. You wouldn't dream of walking in and saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." You wouldn't dream of intruding on that space. And yet it happens on Facebook all the time. And what this says is that Facebook has a different set of rules of communication that gives birth to a different kinds of social relationships. So again, this would be a way that the way that we have come to use Facebook as users has an impact on how we think about an important social reality, which is the reality of death. And then again, what I've done here is I've highlighted a place in the readings here which again sort of highlights one of the basic ideas about how media use affects society. And this is the idea that the way that we use media changes society through the creation of new social spaces. So we begin to think about the online world as literally a material space. It's a place, it's something which has a physical presence that's governed by its own rules. And that makes a change to the social fabric. Now, the other thing that I would indicate about this is that it would be possible to actually order these things all under the topic of media ritual. So this is an article, this is a topic that's inviting you to revisit some of the work that you did in first year. But you can kind of see the way that there's a kind of a structure that will come out here, where you would start off in the second block of your essay with the notion of media ritual and the idea that Facebook is a platform which is used in a particular way that gives a really clear sense of how changing media technologies change our sense of privacy, change the way that we make sense of media space, and form new kinds of social relationships in relation to the act of mourning. So again, hopefully what you can see is the way that what we can do is we can use NVivo to dig out some specific ideas and case studies that help us explain the broader question that we're being asked to answer. And we will work on that more in the workshop.